I crave chaos in like a deep and unhealthy way because of what you described. I'm more comfortable in it. I need the fight. I don't know how to handle times of peace. I know how to handle conflict. I know how to handle the fight. I know how to handle anxiety. I know how to handle these things where I'm like, everything is firing on all cylinders. But you put me in a calm, comfortable place, and all of a sudden, I don't know what to do with myself.
Are you going through life blind? This is Eyes Wide Open with Nick Thompson. On this podcast, we share knowledge and stories that build human connection while elevating stigmatized societal issues such as mental health, holistic wellness, culture, free speech, and more. All to ensure we show up in the world with our eyes wide open. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Eyes Wide Open. Our guest today is Will Craig. Will is a mental health advocate, speaker, and author of the book One Step Forward, Ideally in the Right Direction, and the host of the Instagram Live series and podcast available on Spotify called Sunday Reset with Will and Friends. Will, welcome. How are you today?
Doing pretty well, Nick. How about you?
I am doing just fine. It is holiday season, so I'm gearing up. It's dark for like 30 minutes already. We're here at 5 o'clock.
That's why I left the Midwest. I left the Midwest.
Oh, it's brutal. And it's been so cold in Chicago too, where it's like, I think we had -8 last week. Today I get up, I'm like all excited to take the dog out. It's 5 degrees. I'm like, this is ridiculous. It's December. It should be in the 30s.
And I know your walks you're not negotiable. I know that about you. However, I think I would negotiate that because I at a certain rate, like that's too cold. I'm sorry.
I know.
It's too cold.
I do 10 minutes when it's too cold. And I have kind of like a block I can walk around that takes about 10 minutes. But when it gets this cold, the dog doesn't even want to do it. He's like,
yeah, you're like dragging him along.
Yeah, he's like holding his paw up like it's too cold. It's too cold. But it's funny because then I took him to the park today before we were recording, and he can, when he's off his leash, he can run around the park. He's not bothered by the cold. But when he's on a walk in the morning, it's like, oh, my paw, it's too cold.
Because he knows dad will take care of him. That's what it is.
100%.
Now 100%. I have a rule. I love your city. I love your city to death. We bonded over Malort. I love Chicago, but I will not go after Thanksgiving until at the maybe earliest mid-April. It's about as early as you're going to catch me in Chicago. I've done New Year's there.
You might still get snow. Like you could still get snow.
Yeah, like maybe early April, but like that's what I'm saying. Like I can't do that. April is still a coin toss of whether or not you're going to see snow. That's wild.
It is. It's such a weird. And this year's been really weird. We had snow one day, but it was gone by like the afternoon. It was kind of a lot of snow actually, but I have a feeling we're going to get polar vortex cold and all sorts of snowstorms this year. I don't really want to do it.
No, come down to Tampa.
Well, this is the first year that I've kind of been like, because it's been cold. It's usually not this cold by now. It's like 30 degrees. You get some 40s sprinkled in there. Now it's like been cold for 2 weeks straight. And I'm like, why am I living here? Like I usually don't feel that way until February. I'm like, why am I here? Now I'm like, why am I here? Am I putting up with this for 4 more months? Jeez.
I distinctly remember. So I lived in Indianapolis before I moved to Florida. And I'm from Indiana, for those who don't know. And I distinctly remember it was the last winter before my wife and I, my now wife, at the time we weren't even engaged. We were just dating. But I distinctly remember like walking from my parking garage to the office where I worked and it being particularly cold that day and windy. And I was like, I never want to do this again. I'm so miserable because it's not just the cold. It's also maybe in Chicago, it's a little better, but in Indy, it just always felt like it was not only cold, but it was also so gloomy.
Oh yeah.
So dark. And when you don't see the sun for that long and you're that cold and no one wants to go outside, no one wants to do anything, how does every single person in the Midwest not have some form of seasonal depression?
Well, I think we do. I know I do. I think that a lot of people just don't know.
They don't know that they can be happy because they can be somewhere else in December. Like the snowbirds have it right. We get a lot of them down here. And I understand their philosophy. They're like, hey, Minnesota's great in June and July.
So, same summertime shy.
Oh,
Like this
I love
best
Chicago in the
place.
summer.
Yeah, best place to be. I'm actually going to Indy in February, so you'll have
Oh,
to tell me what I should be doing for a couple days.
all right. I'll definitely do that.
Yeah. So I got to ask. I asked my guests two questions now. It used to just be one. Now it's two because I'm always curious. But what's top of mind for you today?
Oh, boy. Obviously, the holidays always bring an extra layer of complexity to everyone's life. But what's top of mind for me is funny enough. So I literally had therapy today. And I was talking to my therapist, and I was talking about how when you're someone who is like diving headfirst into your mental health journey and you're really going, really deep into it, it's very easy to like take a step back and like go, well, I've done a lot. I've done a lot of growth. I'm happy. I'm good. But then something creeps up. Something creeps up and something comes top of mind to you where you're like, wait a minute, have I really explored all of this as much as I thought I did? You got like surface
You
level
never
good.
have. You never have. You think you have, but you never have.
Yeah, so the way my therapist worded it that I thought was really clever was like new level unlocked for those who play video games. Like you just all you did was graduate to the next level. There's no actual graduation from all of this. This is just you're just getting to that next level of like consciousness. And there's no actual end to any of it. It's just you figure out there's a new door over here and now you have to go over there and figure out what that means. So I think that's like the big thing top of mind to me is like, what does this next chapter for me look like? And I wrote a blog post last night just kind of talking about like, hey, I got to own some of my stuff. Like the pity party's over. I'm done with cop outs. I'm now aggressively taking on my faults and trying to be better for it.
Which is scary. Taking on your faults is scary. That's one of the hardest things I think people struggle with is realizing that you're not defined by the things you've done wrong or the things that you struggle with. And if you embrace them and put your best foot forward to really be better, you can change your life and you can change your relationships.
100%. There's a quote I love that says, never be a prisoner of your past. It was just a lesson, not a life sentence.
That's good.
Yeah, and it's I wish I wrote it, but like it's such a mantra that we can all take on. Is especially if you're someone who has done something that you're particularly not proud of, you can hone in on that and like hold yourself accountable to it for a lifetime if you're not careful. Mm-hmm. The reality is like it was just meant to be a lesson in your life. It was just meant to be. I accept that there are some heinous acts that people can commit, but outside of those, like most of us. It was just meant to be a lesson. It was just meant to be something that we went through, we learned from, and we got better for it.
Well, I think a lot of people don't learn from their lessons too, which becomes one of the issues. And then you then when you're sitting with it, instead of learning from it and taking something away from it, you're sitting there and you're more so stewing in your own juices, right? Or I have this saying that I have where life is peaks and valleys. When you're in a valley, set up a campsite, don't buy property. And it's because I think people can get stuck in, I used to call it the cycle of suck. I hear other people use that term now. I should have trademarked it. Yeah.
It should have been shorts.
Yeah, I know. The number of things that I should have trademarked in my time it's crazy. But I think people get stuck in it. And then, you can't get out of it because you get this victim mentality. And then when you have that victim mentality, everything's happening to you and you're not actually able to process or move forward or reframe your way of thinking. And that's where people get really stuck.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's like you can get so caught up in those feelings because I think for some people they genuinely believe they deserve whatever negative feelings are coming towards them. And you can become
self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So that was like the epiphany that I had even just last night writing my most recent like blog post was like just thinking about it from that context of like, is it actually a self-fulfilling prophecy or am I making it so because I know that it's easier? For me,
100%.
yeah, because like that self-fulfilling prophecy, I can blame it on that all I want, but at the end of the day, like I think sometimes I lean into the pain aggressively because I'm like, hey, I know what
You're
this
comfortable
is.
there. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's exactly
Which
what it
sounds
is.
messed up.
My therapist gave me that. God, when was this? I had a relatively. I didn't have the best relationships and girlfriends when I was like in my 20s. Um, you know,
Most of us don't.
most of us don't.
No.
I didn't know what the hell I was doing. They didn't know what the hell they were doing. And I just remember I had this one relationship in my early 30s that went like we didn't have those blow up toxic types of conflicts. And I remember like my therapist was like, because I was just like uneasy about it. That was
Right.
like I was constantly kind of uneasy about it. Like I didn't trust it. It didn't seem real. I wasn't sure if she liked me the way I liked her, despite comment. Like I was just so used to just being in like this chaos that I didn't realize that I was just more comfortable there. And then when I was able to, she's like, do you think that you might be, I forget the exact word, but she's like, do you think you might be just more comfortable in this state of anxiety about a relationship than actually being able to enjoy it?
Mm-hmm.
And it clicked with me and it was like, oh my God, that's it. And that wasn't even just there. Like a lot of my like time growing up was constant state of anxiety, moving around all the time, not knowing, if I'm coming or going, like all sorts of different stuff. And it was just, it was a real turning point to kind of have that, oh, I'm just more comfortable in a state of anxiety. And it was so freeing. I was so free after that. And, just very like I lost, like I just, the anxiety just fell off of me for all until Love Is Blind. But it just like it fell off of me. It really did. Like I remember I even said when I was in the pause at one point, I'm like, I don't really experience anxiety anymore. About certain things like work related stuff, but like I don't have a constant state of anxiety anymore. And that was a turning point.
Until Love Is Blind.
Until I was blind.
But no, I think so. What you described, like not just from the perspective of like relationships, but life. Like, so what you're describing is exactly like the epiphany that I had with my therapist about 3 to 4 years ago. Was I crave chaos in like a deep and unhealthy way because of what you described. I'm more comfortable in it. I need the fight. I don't know how to handle times of peace. I know how to handle conflict. I know how to handle the fight. I know how to handle anxiety. I know how to handle these things where I'm like, everything is firing on all cylinders. But you put me in a calm, comfortable place, and all of a sudden, I don't know what to do with myself.
Yeah.
And so I had to realize that and then figure out different ways to create the same chaos without blowing up my life.
Right. And how do you do that? Like, what
For
are your
me,
coping mechanisms? Because I can imagine just from my own experience with stuff, like it doesn't just go away. You're just kind of keeping it at bay.
yeah, I mean that's exactly it. Like the reality is like trying to rewire. There's some rewiring that people can do with their minds. I believe that to be true, but there are some things that are just so deeply entrenched in your DNA that like it's probably never going to change, and you're better off seeking an outcome where you just learn how to live with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, like that's what I do with the chaos is I'm not going to get rid of this anxious energy that lives inside of me. I'm not that's not a realistic expectation. But what I can do is find meaningful outlets. So as an example, I have a day job, but then outside of that, I bartend one night a week.
Mm.
And I do that as
There's
kind of
some
my
chaos.
yeah. Yeah, you're pouring alcohol to a bunch of grown adults and watching the mayhem ensue. Thankfully, it's a pretty low key spot, but nonetheless, it's still like when I'm there, it's the one time in my life where like I put my phone over here, and as long as we're like decently busy, I'm here. This is the only thing I can focus on. It's the only thing I can like give my attention to. And in a lot of ways, like bartending became like a therapy session for me. That, and then the other thing that I did was for a long time in my like early 20s, I was like dead set on being a stand-up comedian. I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to get a back then it was, Comedy Central special. That was the goal, right? Now it's Netflix or whatever, but
You
I
can do
was dead
your
set.
own special on YouTube.
That's what I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
now the barrier to entry has gotten so low. It's not in a bad way. I just mean like it's just easier to put your stuff out there. But I was dead set on this, and then life happened. I didn't feel as funny anymore, and I got away from it. And then now I have no desire to be famous for comedy, but what I do love doing is I'm in the Tampa Bay like stand-up comic like Facebook group where we post all the open mics. And so what I'll do is I'll find out an open mic's happening like tonight at Soggy Bottom Brewing in Dunedin, which is 20 minutes from my house. They're having an open mic tonight. If I just decided right now I could do the open mic, I would do it. And that's what I would do. I'll wait till like the last minute.
But is it like muscle memory if you haven't been practicing or performing and then you just go and you can do it again? Or is there...
So that's the trick, right? So if your goal was to make it as a stand-up comic, your goal should then be, I'm going to work on this bit. Maybe it's 2 minutes, maybe it's 3 minutes, maybe it's 5 minutes. I'm going to work on this thing over and over and over again. So every open mic you go to, every chance you get, you're going to run through this over and over again. Get so good at it that it becomes muscle memory. And then you work on the next bit. And then eventually you got 10 to 15 minutes, and then someone ideally would give you like a feature act where you could get paid a little bit, very little, but like it's still something, but you have enough material that works. Mm-hmm. So what I do, and this is where I can access that chaos side of me, is every single time when I decide to do it that night, that day, I write my material. It's fresh every single time.
Oh, wow.
So I get off work, it's like 5:30, and I eat dinner with my wife, and then I go in our bedroom and I play music, or I play like a stand-up comedy special as background noise to like fill it out, and then I just come up with something. And then I drive, and she goes with me, and I drive over and I do the thing, and sometimes it goes well and sometimes it doesn't. But that's the chaos that I create. I didn't let her. I don't like using the word "let" with my wife, but like I was not a fan. I was not a fan of her coming for a very very long time. But eventually I gave in, and I was like, "Yeah, you can come." And then now it's funny because she's like, I get this nervous energy, but I know you secretly kind of like it when you don't do well. And I was like, yeah, a little bit. I mean, to be fair, I can't expect it to go well when I know I wrote this material 2 hours before I got here.
Well, and I'm not a stand-up comedian, but I've listened to some talk before, and a lot of times and even like Joe Rogan will say this, like you're kind of trying stuff out a lot until you perfect it. So like you're going to nightclubs or you're doing these open mic nights and stuff, you're trying stuff out. And then by the time you get that special or whatever, you've worked it all through various different audiences and know what resonates and what hits, and you can figure out your timing and your punchlines and all of that stuff. Is that true?
That's exactly it. That's what you need to do. That's why my plan of attack doesn't work if that's your goal.
Yeah. If
your goal is to make it, my plan is not the move. Because you need to get really good at whatever it is. And like you said, know the punchlines, know the beat, be able to augment it slightly depending on your audience, right? Yeah. Like I remember, so the first time I ever started doing stand-up comedy, this is back in a club that doesn't even exist anymore. But I wasn't even like legal drinking age, but it was a bar, and I still performed. And my first night I went up, I'll be honest, I like did very, very well. I got a lot of laughs. It was great. I made a fatal mistake though, which was that I thought, oh, I'm just good at this. And then I came back like a week later, and at the original time I went up, it was a bunch of college kids, a bunch of 20-somethings, all having a few drinks, all having a few laughs, and my material was geared directly towards them. So it was perfect. It was like catnip for them. I come back the next time, that audience wasn't there. It was actually a lot of people, average age probably somewhere like 48. And I'm trying this college material that like does not resonate with them at all.
Mm.
And I'm just, and I'm just, I'm
And you had
just dying.
all the swagger going into that.
Oh yeah, and I'm losing my mind. I cut myself. I had 5 minutes, and I cut it to like 2.5. I was like, this is
Oh
so bad,
wow.
and I was like, I'm done. I'm out. And I walked off stage, and the club owner like was dying laughing as I walked off the stage. He's like, "Good, you needed that."
It
He's
was
like,
kind
"You
of
have
like
to learn."
yeah, I was going to say it was kind of like a tough love, swift kick in the arse.
No, it's 100% that, because like it's not supposed to go well, and you're supposed to get the reps in, and you're supposed to do the work, and you part of learning is knowing your audience, knowing how to pivot. Like you see a lot of comics, a lot of times if you watch stand-up specials, if you're paying attention, the first like handful of minutes is usually something specific to whatever place they're at. They're doing it
Mm,
because they're trying to get a feel for like what jokes are going to play and what jokes are not
right.
going to play. Even when they know they're taping it, and they know it's going to probably do pretty well because at this point they've probably done this 1,000 times. They're still kind of getting a feel for like, hey, what joke is going to land here? Can I go this way with it? Can I go that way
Mm,
with it? And they're getting a feel for it, so they know what levels to. Because again, if you've done this set so many times, you have a feeling for the rhythm, but you have a different way
right.
you can approach it for a different audience.
And that can be like that audience can be like you said, college, or it can be older, younger, this side of the country, that side of the country.
Right.
Like I bet like I think about politics, right? And I think you can
Sure.
tell a lot of the same jokes, but where the emphasis is would be different in California than it might be in Indianapolis.
100%.
Yeah.
And Indianapolis is different than like rural Alabama, which is
Right.
different than Los Angeles versus San Francisco. Like like it's all, so much of it is like who is going to be your demographic that shows up to that show. Now, granted, most comics, if you're paying to go to a show, especially if it's not at a traditional comedy club, it's like actually at like a theater or something. Typically, by the time you get to like the theater and above level, maybe arenas, you are someone who has a well-established fan base, and you know who your audience is. They're the ones
Mm,
shelling out the big bucks to go see you. But when
right.
you're in that early stages of like a comedy club, like a big one here, it's very popular. It's called Side Splitters here in Tampa.
Okay.
It's been talked about on Rogan and all those podcasts. Like all the old school comics love this theater, it's tiny, but it's great. It's a classic old school comedy club. Um, but I mean, you get people that just go to these shows and have no idea who the comic is. They haven't
Wow.
looked at any of their
Well, I
stuff
mean, I
ahead of
guess
time.
yeah, I guess that makes sense because you're just going to a comedy show. I've done
Right.
that before.
Oh,
But if it's someone
100%.
if I'm going to see someone
Yeah.
and
If
it's
you're a
not
big
like a
Tom
last
Segura
minute,
fan,
yeah,
you know you're going to see Tom Segura at this theater.
right.
But
That's
like,
exactly right.
but your local comedy club, for someone that maybe, I mean, who knows? In the day of social media, like some people have gotten big followings,
Mm-hmm.
but they're still like, even if they have a big following on Instagram or something or TikTok, that doesn't translate to like big arena tour. So a
Right.
lot of them are still playing at the the improv or the side splitters or the funny bone or any a helium comedy club is another chain of them. That's where that's gonna sit. And so people might show up to those shows because I mean tickets are anywhere from 20 to $40 depending on the
Right.
act. So a lot of people could just write that off as like, oh, it's just a fun evening out. We don't even know who the comic is. We just feel like going to a comedy show tonight. So those comedy shows are a little bit like, who knows? You have no idea what your audience is going to look like.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That's true. That makes sense. So I feel like my question of what did you want to be when you were growing up and how did that change kind of got answered in there. So I didn't want to interrupt and ask it, but so I'm going to reframe it a minute unless you want to just respond to it. But so comedian, you kind of dabbled with that. Now you're doing the mental health advocacy, the speaking. You wrote a book. How did you get to that point in your journey?
So actually, comedy was never a thing when I was a kid, but it does come full circle. If you ask my sixth grade teacher, and I know this because when my book came out, she commented on it on Facebook. If you ask my sixth grade teacher what I was going to be, if it wasn't playing in the NBA, because when I was 12 years old, I was 5'8". I'm only 5'11" now. But at the time, I was like, oh, he might actually be something. If it wasn't going to the NBA, my job was going to be a writer. I was going to write a book. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to do this. Now, I definitely leaned more into like the fiction realm back then, but I loved writing. at an early age, and I loved it so much, and it was such an outlet for me um, as a young man. So like where it came kind of full circle was that how I got to here to answer that question. What it came down to is like I at this point now it's like it's been almost a decade. But
So you were doing it before it was trendy.
yeah, yeah, at this point I've been blogging since like, yeah, nearly a decade ago.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
but what it came down to for me, like where writing came back into the fold of being prolific again, was I had had a handful of moments in my life that shaped myself from like a mental health journey. And in those moments, the thing that kept hitting me was I felt entirely alone. I felt so
Mhm.
alone in this journey, and I felt like nobody was going to understand, and nobody was going to get where I was coming from, and so I'm better off just holding it all in. And then eventually I went to therapy, and
How old
even
were you?
there, at this point I was in my like mid to late 20s, and because I finally went to therapy like for real. I had like gone like
What?
once or twice as like
Yeah.
not as a joke, but like I didn't take it seriously, so it might as well have been a joke for me.
You have to be ready for therapy. I did it in my early 20s. I wasn't ready for it. I thought it was going to be like different than it was. So I get
One hundred
that. But like,
percent.
what was your like thought process of going to therapy? Because as you know, as we know, it's getting better. But as men, it's not always the coolest thing to go do. And
No, for me it was speaking to the man part of it. Like, so at the time, I was dating a woman for about a year, and she died unexpectedly.
oh my goodness, I'm sorry to hear that.
And so for me, her name was Allison, and I'm the one who was there when the police came and all of this, and like a very fairly very very traumatic event. And I had had some other stuff, some suicidal ideation myself and other parts in that. And sorry, I want to make sure that's clear. Like those were not related. Like she died by natural causes, but
Mm-hmm.
I want to be very clear about that. But like I went through my own stuff where I probably should have dived into therapy more seriously, but I didn't. And then when she passed, I was in this place where even like my dad and my grandpa were like looking at me like, kid, you're not supposed to know how to deal with this. These are stoic men from the Midwest. Like this is not like therapy was not a common dinner conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying they were against it or anything, but just like it
Right.
wasn't like commonly talked about. But they both like at different points like sat me down and were like, you're not supposed to know how to deal with this. You need to talk to someone. And that's what like kind of like opened my eye to be like, okay, I guess I have to do this. And so I sat down with a therapist. But even that, to your point, like how do you prepare mentally for that? To like sit down with a therapist and do it the right way. And so I was sitting there and I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to say. You tell me. What am I supposed to say? What am I supposed to do? I'm broken. Fix me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, we kind of talked a little bit about, my background and my history. And she's like, you love writing, right? You love writing. How about between now and the next session, write a letter to Allison. Write a letter to the God you don't believe in. Write a letter to whatever it is. Like write a letter to anything to get you going, to get your thoughts out of your mind. Because right now you just don't know how to express them to me. And so that's where writing first entered the chat. And then
Journaling.
yeah,
It's really
and so
journaling.
so then after some time, eventually like came to a place where I was like, okay, I'm now more comfortable expressing my thoughts and ideas. I've gone to therapy. I've worked on some things, and I was in a bit of like a career transition in my life. And I paused and I went, you know what? I look back on things and I realized again, I felt alone. I felt like no one was going to understand. What if I took these things that I'm feeling and put them out there for the world? What might happen? Who might find this and think they're not alone anymore? And if I have one actual talent in this life, it's that I generally speaking lack shame. I'm not afraid
Well,
to be the one to
the
raise his
stand-up
hand.
comedian with jokes you just wrote that day says a lot about that.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I very, very seldom do I care what anyone thinks. I'm not afraid to make a fool of myself. It's proved me well in a lot of places. And so I thought, what a waste of this if I don't use it for something good. And so I said, I'll put it out there. So like my first ever blog post was talking about the night Allison died.
Mm,
And then from there, it just went into this like, what am I feeling in this moment? What am I tackling right now in therapy? What am I tackling within myself? And I kept doing it, and I still do it. Like I literally posted one today's December 12th, yeah, and I posted one this morning, blog post. Not as prolific as I once did, but yeah, the writing kind of became there naturally. And then going back to the original question before my rambling here, uh, you asked about the writing, and like, yeah, that eventually that led me to writing a book because a friend challenged me to write one.
mm. And what was tell us about your book?
Yeah, so as mentioned, it's called One Step Forward, Ideally in the Right Direction, and you know the big thing that I wanted to challenge in this was that I feel like so many mental health or self help books that exist out there are very formulaic in the sense of like, here are your 12 steps to enlightenment, or whatever the case may be. I have nothing against any of those books, but that's not what speaks to me. I would
Mm-hmm.
rather it come from anybody who knows me personally and has read my book will tell you it sounds like we sat down on the back porch and had a conversation. Probably had an
Mm,
adult beverage or two
right.
and just had a great conversation about life. And that's what I always meant it to be was here. And so it starts off in the intro being, here's the reason why this matters to me. Here's the reason why mental health matters to me. Here's my journey. And then the rest of it is, here's some things that I've realized along the way. Maybe it resonates with me. Maybe it doesn't. I don't pretend to have all the answers, but hopefully this
You're
makes
just
someone feel
sharing
less alone.
you're sharing your experience, right? So
Right.
that's the thing. Everyone's experience isn't going to resonate with everyone, but it's going to resonate with some people. And I always think back to
Exactly.
that, what you were saying before. I struggle a lot with loneliness and feeling alone, and I always have since as long as I can remember. And that's probably where um, oh, I actually know, like, I have this uncontrollable need to help people,
Okay.
and it's because I don't ever want them to feel alone the way that I've felt alone so much through my life. And I think I forgot what I was going with that, but I think what I was going to say is like sharing it and talking about mental health or doing things like I do with my activism for reality TV and stuff like that. It's because I don't want people to have these experiences or feel alone when they do have these experiences, because I felt alone when I had those experiences, and I don't think that's right.
Right.
So I appreciate sort of that mentality that you have to take what you've learned and you've experienced and you've survived, quite frankly, survived, and then being able to share that as sort of a gift to other people who may not know you, may not ever talk to you, but may read something you've written or may read your book or your blog or listen to your podcast and find something in there that gets them through a tough time or gets them through that moment of loneliness, or something that you talk about directly relates to them.
Yeah, it's been incredible just in my own personal circle, right? Just watching how me starting with blogging, but then eventually the book and everything, and me being outspoken, how it's evolved my friendships even. Like I remember I went with a couple of my buddies um, to the Bourbon Trail, and we were just meeting up. We all live in different parts of the country. Um, all have different lives that exist, and so we just kind of came together. But we've all been friends since we were like 12 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and so we sat around, and like at that point, like my book had come out, and they were like, "Dude, I've been your friend for 2 decades, and I didn't know half of this shit,"
Mm-hmm.
you know. And we realized that like while we've been friends for a very long time, like let's be honest, like we don't We don't dive into these deep waters. We don't talk
Yeah.
about these things. And so it was amazing. We literally sat around. It was like a Thursday night or Friday or something. Like we sat around until like 3 a.m, just talking, sharing stories like, oh man, I had no idea you were going through that. Weirdly enough, around this time, I was going through something. And it's like, holy crap, like this would have never happened if someone didn't step forward, which is kind of where the title comes
Right.
from. It's like someone has to make the step forward. Somebody has to pause and go, I'm going to be the one to put myself out there. Hopefully that then inspires others to do the same thing.
100%. I understand that. I appreciate people like that. I am like that myself. I don't want to be that way, but I am. So it takes leadership, bravery, and a lot of authenticity, which is, I know, something that's important to you too. One thing that you touched on a minute ago that I kind of wanted to it's like 20 minutes ago that I wanted to get back to. You mentioned when you were first talking about what's top of mind, you talked about the holidays, and I'm glad that came up because here we are. I'm actually going to, because we're going to talk about this, and I'm going to be on a little bit of a best of hiatus for a few weeks. After next week, I will drop this next week. But the holidays are hard, man. I have struggled with the holidays since I was a kid. There's so much expectation. There's so much pressure from society to be happy and do this. And, I just talked to someone I've been talking to about setting up a Christmas tree. And I'm like, I'm not setting up a Christmas tree for me and the dog. Like, it's fine. It's too much work. One, two, it's like sometimes the holidays are a reminder that my holidays aren't really what I would like them to be. And so what I want to ask you is, what is your holiday experience like, and how do you, if you have to, maybe they're great, I don't really know, but like, what are your holiday experiences like, and what are some of the mechanisms you use to kind of get through them, for lack of a better word?
No, it's a great question. Quite honestly, myself, who I am as a human being, I'm a bit of a Grinch when it comes to the holidays. Like, I agree with everything you said. Like, there's a lot of like false expectations that people have around the holidays. I think, I think about my life, and I look back on things, and I realize that so much of like what made the holiday special was the people you were with. But then like sometimes like life isn't that simple. It's like you want to have that hallmark moment with your family or your friends or any of those things, but all the things that led up to Christmas Day maybe weren't always the greatest. And you have to now fake it for this one moment. And I've just never been. And then I think a little bit also for me, for like a very long time, like work wise, I worked in jobs where like Christmas and holidays were like our busiest time.
I know.
So
how it is for me right now. I'm like, I feel like everyone's ramping down, and somehow at my work we're ramping up.
yeah. Oh yeah. It was it was crazy. And so it's like, so I have this like almost negative feeling, negative connotation that comes with like when you say holiday, I'm like, ooh. And whereas where it's funny for me is like my wife is the biggest Christmas lover. Like, she loves Christmas, cannot get enough of it. And so it's put us at odds at times where it's like, I just don't have the same enthusiasm. So basically for her, from Halloween to Christmas is like Super Bowl. She never wants to spend money on anything. She will spend money on decorations. She wants to decorate the house. She wants to get involved. She wants to do all the things. And like deep down in my core, I could not possibly care less.
But do you find any value, and I'm not trying to get you in trouble with this question, but do you find any value in, or I shouldn't say value, do you find any joy in seeing how happy it makes her?
That's exactly what it comes down to. It's like, while I personally don't find the same value in it that way, and maybe one day I'll get there. Maybe if we have kids or something, I can see the magic. I already get a little bit of that with, like, we have nephews. We have 3 nephews, and they're amazing. And seeing like the lights in their eyes glow when they see a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
So I get it. I get where some of the magic comes from. But yeah, that's what it is for me. Is with her is like, I love how excited she gets. So it doesn't matter what my opinion is. Right before shooting this, I'm not even joking. Right before, I was walking into my office and I said, "Hey, we haven't watched any Christmas movies yet so far this year. We just haven't done it yet."
She's like, I thought you'd never ask. I've got a whole
Yeah,
queue of Hallmark movies.
I was like, "Hey, whatever you want to," because we've been knee deep in a handful of shows that we're behind on, and I was like, "Hey, tonight we can pause that. Let's watch a Christmas movie. Whatever you want. If it's Christmas Vacation or it's oh, this is the hot take of the episode. I cannot stand the movie Elf.
Oh, I can't either. I can't
I
stand that movie.
I find and I actually like enjoy a lot of Will Ferrell comedies, but like that one to me is like nails on a chalkboard, and she cannot get enough of it.
Oh
But
my
I'm
goodness.
but I'm like, hey, you love it. That's what matters. Like I will be a good sport and I will support this because there are plenty of things that I do that you could not care less about. It's part of being in a good relationship. Like you got to
Yeah.
find ways to support each other.
Yeah, I think so too. I've always found like there's, when I'm with someone that likes different things, I always find myself enjoying seeing them so happy about it.
Right.
Where it's kind of like, you know what, this ain't so bad. I can do this because look at the joy and the happiness that it brings her. So I think it's good I don't know that a lot of people have the emotional wherewithal or intelligence to be able to do something like that too.
Well,
Especially men. We can be very stubborn.
Well, not just stubborn. We're also self-absorbed. Like we're so focused on like what drives us that we don't think about the people around us in the moment to go, hey, yeah, this may not bring me joy, but it's going to bring a handful of people joy. Maybe that's worthwhile. Maybe maybe it's not always about me. I know, hot take, but maybe it's not always about me, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think part of it is just people don't. You know what? It always blows me away sometimes. It always blows me away sometimes. It always blows me away when I see, from an outside perspective, these kinds of things, but in a relationship, not working. Where it is like you've been married to a guy, and he watches football every Sunday all day, and after like 10 years, you're still mad at him for watching football every Sunday all day, and it's like, where's the discussion about why this is such a problem and why this is still a problem and why this is a need for him and why you need to do something else? And why can't you just talk and maybe you watch one football game and then you go on a walk or whatever the heck else you can do, right? But like a lot of people I don't think have that emotional intelligence or communication skills or ability to see another person's perspective. I think a lot of relationships just could benefit from that. Just little simple things like, I'm going to watch this Christmas movie with you. In fact, I'm going to volunteer the idea because I know it's going to make you happy and it's going to be good for our relationship.
And it's not like, because like some people can hear that and take that the wrong way and go like, oh, well, you're like, giving up your thing. It's like, no, like
compromising.
Take Christmas movies out of it for a second. So as a perfect example, my wife and I am the textbook definition of an extrovert. Not just in that I'm talkative and outspoken, but like I draw my energy from being around people.
Mm-hmm.
I just do. It is innate. It's inside of me. My wife has an extroverted type job. She works in HR and she's around people all day, but that drains her battery deeply. And so we constantly are kind of at odds when it comes to our life, where it's like, I want to go do things and she wants to stay home and recharge her battery. And we kept trying to like find this balance of like, what do I do? What do I like, I want to do this, but you want to stay home. I don't want to disappoint you. You don't want to disappoint me. And so we found a good compromise of like, sometimes we go out and do stuff and sometimes we stay home, maybe when I would want to go out, but we were still kind of at odds. And so I think another important lesson that I think for relationships is like, it's also okay to do things independently.
Yes.
So for me, like, that's me. Monday nights, I'm known at Brighter Days Brewing in Tarpon Springs. I am Monday Will, and I bartend at Brighter Days Brewing, and that is me. I go there as soon as I can get off my day job, and I go and I bartend, and I'm social. I get to be around people, and guess what? Not only does my wife get to be at home, she gets to be at home and doesn't have to talk to me. She can talk to no one. She can say no words for 7 hours.
And I know we talked about this extrovert thing when I was on your show, but the thought of going out on a Monday after the weekend is ludicrous. Like you're out of your mind to go work at a bar on a Monday night after a weekend.
I no, like I could do it every single day. I really could. I mean, I will say, as I get a little older, I do start to enjoy a little bit of me time. But at the end of the day, like that's what I'm saying. Like I draw energy from that.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a great way for me to start my week. It's like, oh, I did work and I was like, okay, that was, there's a lot going on there. But now I get to be around people and I get to see my regulars. Hey, how are you doing over here? It's great. I love it. And to be fair, like it's a brewery. We close at 9. It's not deep. Like I'm usually out of there by 9:30.
That's a lot. That's so much to like the Monday nights. I'm like melted into the couch the moment I'm done with work.
So that's my wife. So you guys can enjoy that together. You guys can call each other, talk about it.
No, we don't want to call each other
that's
and talk about it. we can just agree that we're going to enjoy the peace.
That's very true. That's very true. Like she has to like mentally prepare for like tonight, like after we get done with this, we're going to make dinner and then one of us will, and then we're going to go to the grocery store. She's like, wait, we're going to the grocery store on Thursday. Hold on. I got to loosen up.
No, she better. Yeah. She's got to prep for that.
Yeah.
It's like I used to, before COVID, I used to do like happy hour every Thursday with my guy friends. And now I couldn't even, I'm like, what the fuck was I thinking? Like every night, like now it's like once in a while on a Friday, even Fridays though. I'm like, by Friday, I'm like, I'm dead. I'm mentally cooked and I can't socialize on a Friday anymore.
So I will say that's where you and her differ. If you were going to break apart a weekend between Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday, I think she would rather a Friday night than a Sunday day. When it comes to socializing.
We're different.
Because in her mind, it's like, cool, I'm already empty. I might as well just like drain it completely, and then I can just chill the rest of the weekend.
Yeah.
We literally had this conversation tonight. I was texting we have another couple we're friends with, and we haven't hung out with them in a while. And I was like, hey, Haley and I were talking. We're hanging out this weekend. Friday or Saturday, what do you want? And she's like, Friday. I was like, okay, we're going to do Friday. Friday it is.
There it is. See, I can do a Saturday and a Sunday, which is maybe why I don't like Mondays. That could be. But
that could be.
By Fridays, I'm like, I've talked all week at work. I've usually recorded a podcast or two. I've done, all the other shit that I find myself doing. I'm just like last night, I was like, I'm like catatonic sitting here on my freaking couch because I had so many meetings at work that I just talked until 5:00 nonstop. Like sometimes I even lose my voice where it's like, anyway, it's crazy, but I appreciate introverts that make sure we find our ways and our times to decompress and recharge because we need it. We deserve it.
And we extroverts are happy to adopt you to make you a little bit social.
Exactly.
And then you can also bring us back down a level too. I think that's an important part too. Because like I have realized that I've ran on fumes for like years. And it's like in hindsight, like, okay, I do need to have some time for myself.
Yeah.
And now I'm growing to appreciate some times of rest.
Well,
more than I did when I was younger.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about this before we started filming, but self-care, like we talked again a little bit, like I think self-care, I think a lot of just therapy speak in general is like way out of control with how people use it and self-care versus self-indulgence as you put. But how do you take, will time and recharge? Like what are the things that you do?
Something that I've grown very, very fond of over the years is sometimes, like, because of my extroverted nature, like I want to be around people, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I want to be in it. So I'll give you an example. I do usually, like when Alexis is out of town, I do what I call solo date night, where I go to a restaurant I like and I sit at the bar. I might talk to the bartender a little bit here and there, but really I'm just to myself and I'm kind of people watching and I'm enjoying a good meal, maybe having a drink, and I'm just enjoying being around people.
Mm-hmm.
I got into this habit. So when Alexis and I first started dating, uh, she worked at Target at the time, and so she would randomly have weekends she worked. My roommate at the time had his son sometimes during the week or during the weekend. So like there would be times where there's overlap where like they couldn't do things. I had just entered corporate America again after leaving like the bar industry. And so a lot of my friends were working on the weekend. So I'd have these Saturdays where it's like no one can hang out. It's just me. But I want to get out. I've been kind of cooped up. I want to go do something. And so yeah, I kind of started this habit and I still try to stick to it to some degree. Is like sometimes it's not about, like I said, like having the back and forth conversation. I just want to be among the people, and I bring my journal with me, and I just like kind of like take notes and think
See, I'll
about
do
life.
that
And
at a coffee shop, but to do that at a bar, I would be too like, whoa.
Keep in mind, we're not talking like a busy. I'm talking like a restaurant that has a bar, not a bar.
So like a Chili's bar.
Yeah, or like actually, mine is Longhorn.
Okay. Oh yeah, I know Longhorn. Yeah.
Yeah. Longhorn's I know the bartender there. I've gotten to know him pretty well over time. When I was in Indianapolis, there's a place called Aspen Creek. It was like 5 minutes from my apartment, but like same kind of thing as like your typical Outback, something like that. So I'd go up to the bar, order a steak with a couple sides, and sit there and have a drink. And yeah, I would either sometimes I felt social. I'd want to be engaging in the conversation with people around me. Sometimes I don't. And I travel. I got used to it because I travel a lot for my day jobs. And like day jobs I've had in the past and even now. And so you kind of used when you're traveling, you get used to that, like whether it's like a layover or like you get to the hotel and you go to dinner. Are you one of those people when you travel for work? Do you just go like order DoorDash and sit in your hotel room?
Yeah.
You are?
Usually, yeah. If it's just me, yeah. But I will tell you, I do enjoy going to the bar at an airport, having a couple cocktails, and seeing if I pick up an interesting conversation. I do like doing that, but only at the airport. At the airport.
That's because airports are these lawless lands that like there are no rules. There are no rules. You can have a beer at 7 a.m. You can have a coffee at 9 p.m. It doesn't matter. No, everyone's just here doing the best they can.
I've been doing like the American or the United Club because it's like $50 to $70 or whatever. And I'm just sitting, I'll go like 2 hours early, pay that, like just keep the mimosas coming. It's like 8 a.m. or whatever. I'm like, it's who can I talk to? Like I'm all for that at the airport, but you're right. It's because the airports are this little capsule of lawlessness where no one's going to judge you for drinking mimosas at 8 a.m.
So I have a funny story with that. I was on a layover for a work flight, and I was like a couple hours, and I was in Austin, but I was transferring to Dallas, and it was so funny. Like I just wanted to have a quick meal, that was it, and then there was not one but two groups of people that were they were families, and they had someone in the group that were turning 50. And there was a big to-do. They were like, we're going to travel for this. We're going to go to PCB. We're going to have a whole blowout party. So they're at the airport on their layover, or maybe that was their starting point. I don't know for sure. But they were already like, we're getting in. We're having a great time. And they're like leaning. I'm sitting at the bar. I'm being quiet. They're leaning over me, trying to order shots of stuff. Well, eventually they look at me and they're like, my man, you have been so kind to deal with our nonsense. Like, come join our group. So now I'm like in this family affair, like enjoying the party. They're like, hey, do you want to come with us? I'm like, well, I got a work thing, but maybe later I'll catch you on the backside. And they're buying me drinks. And I'm like, but like in what world do you have that type of interaction? And I personally, like it doesn't have to be a bar. I think bars have a segment of the community but I feel like bars are one of the few places in the world where like a stranger can walk up to you and it's like somewhat socially acceptable. I can't walk up to your table at Chili's and just be like, hey guys, I'm Will. Nice to meet you. You want to split some appetizers?
You could. It would probably not go over well.
I mean, yeah, you can do whatever you want, but that's not going to go over well. But if I walk up to you like, hey man, how's it going? At a bar, it's like less weird, especially if I offer
you want
to
do a shot? Yeah, you want to do a Malort?
Oh my God. Yeah. So for those who don't know, the whole reason Nick and I even know each other outside of like we got introduced by a mutual friend, but then after that, like we didn't talk for, 3 or 4 months. And then I bonded with him over Malort in Chicago, which if you have not had, you should have it at some point in time.
You should have it. And on the website now, there's like a Malort finder. So you can see it's infected. It actually literally looks like the Planet of the Apes or a zombie movie where they're showing the disease infecting.
Spreading out.
Yeah. It's like Malort's everywhere, but it's It's a phenomenal little aperitif shot that is made here in Chicago.
It is hilarious that you're exactly right. Like, without having seen that map, I know exactly what you mean, because I've started seeing it at random bars when I've traveled where people are like, I'm like, why does this place? I've seen it on tap at places,
Yeah,
and I'm
that's
like,
disgusting. I've seen it on
horrifying.
tap too. Yeah, I don't fuck with that. That's for sure.
No. I mean, I have, but I don't like it. I don't like what it's about. I've got a really good friend who used to live in Arizona, and then he now lives in Denver. But we had a bunch of friends in Chicago area, and then so he took a couple bottles with him. So he's been spreading the news to Tucson and now Denver. He's like, "Oh, you've never had Malort? You need to have a shot of Malort."
I'm going to start sending people that visit home with a bottle of Malort so it can just infect wherever they're coming from.
It's going to become a phenomenon, or it might actually.
I think it already is. I think it's
going to start the next zombie apocalypse. I think that's what's going to happen, and Malort's just going to spread too much.
It could.
It's too powerful.
It's way too powerful. I love it though.
This episode is brought to you by Malort.
It's funny because everyone tells me that Malort should sponsor the podcast or do some sort of like collaboration with me on social because of how much I talk about it, how much I tag them, how much I make people do it, and I video them and put it on my Instagram. And I don't think their social media manager likes me for some reason because they will not engage with anything I do. I tag them. They just look at it. They don't even give it a like, nothing. And I'm not trying. I'm just doing it because I actually genuinely like it. And I like giving the Malort experience to people who are visiting. And I think like the reactions are funny and stuff. But I just feel like it's a personal thing with that Malort social media manager.
All right, we're going to test this. Next time I'm in Chicago, you and I are going to meet up at some point. We're going to do a shot of Malort, but I'll post the video.
There we go.
You.
We'll see what happens.
Let's see if they reshare it or something. Yeah. That'll be a fun experiment. No, I've not tried that, but it is interesting to think about because you would think they would want to get their name out there more.
Especially when you've got a homeboy that's tagging you just because it's fun, but whatever, who cares? They'll figure it out. So, what are you, I know we're coming up on time. I know we've already gone later than expected. I hope that's okay, but
totally fine.
What's your elevator pitch to men and women? Like when you actually, let me back up. Do you, cause I know you speak, you do, you have guests and stuff like what is your thought on as a man or your experience as a man talking about mental health? A lot of times with other men, talking about your own experiences, like, what is that like for you? And does it get to like, do you get negative feedback? Is there, how do you overcome the stigma, I guess?
So I want to make sure I understand the question correctly. So are you asking for like how people react to what it is that I do? Or do you mean like if I bring up mental health in a conversation among men?
Both.
Okay. So as far as like what I do, not really. Funny enough, it's actually been more positive than you would think. Like, it's funny. I grew up in the Midwest and I played football and basketball and all this. And I've actually had guys that I played football with that like I haven't talked to in a decade plus that like will reach out to me and be like, hey, I've actually been struggling. I'm really glad. Like, I love your videos. I'm
awesome.
Really glad you said that. So it's been overwhelmingly positive in that way. You still get, I think the thing that probably sticks in my side the most with people I know and I'm friends with is that like they love it for me, but they won't necessarily go down the rabbit hole for themselves.
I get that too.
And it's a bit frustrating because I never want to be preachy. I never want to get down that side of things because it's not my job to tell you what to do.
No, it's not.
But I want happiness for anyone in my life. So it's like this game of like, so what I try to do personally is like ask probing questions when it's opportune, not necessarily being like outright like, you should go see a therapist.
How's your mental health, Bob?
Yeah. But instead, like, they bring up a topic and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, tell me a little bit more about that. And like kind of open it up and like give them a chance. If nothing else, I want to be a place like, cause I'm not a therapist. I'm not the guy who's like clinically trained, but can I be a place for you to
Actually
vent
talk.
for a second?
Yeah.
Yeah, like vent for a second. Like, because so much of it is just getting it off your chest. So that's what I try to, that's been like kind of my thing. And then as far as like the bigger picture of like men and mental health and like where we can go from there, I think so much of it comes down to the stigma. Thankfully, I'm a pretty big guy. You never met me in person, but like I'm a pretty big guy, so like no one's really gonna step up in front of me and be like, "You're a little bitch for liking mental health and caring about it." So thankfully, that doesn't happen. But in turn, like then that gives me like that presence. I can kind of like take a step back and go, "Hey, are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. Like it's not a big deal. I'm not trying to pry. Just are you good? You sure? Let's talk about it." And then you can kind of start to have that kind of conversation.
Yeah. You know what I've started doing that I have found a lot of, not success. Sometimes I have a hard time like going from work to a podcast recording where I'm talking in like a very specific way about like business and shit. And then I come on here and I'm trying to talk about feelings. And it's like, like the
so you have a
language
customer
hasn't
service
switched.
voice.
Yeah.
Or tone or language. Like I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
We're not talking about a lot of synergistic alliances on this call. I get what you're saying.
But one thing I've found to be very helpful in connecting with people is asking them how they feel about something instead of like what they think. So like, hey, what do you think about this like happening? Or what, instead, how do you feel about this? And I find that the answers, or how are you feeling today? I find out that the answers are much more authentic and less like analytical. Like, I use,
there's an implied thought process on thinking versus feeling.
Yeah, exactly. Because like I know I think about things differently than I feel about them. And I always use the example of politics. Like I think about politics very different than I feel about politics. Sure. And a lot of times, like what I think and I say and I think is going to happen, or I think people should do, or I think people should consider, like people assume that's how I feel about something. And so that's not the case. But it's like that with a lot of things. Like, I don't know if you saw my story, but the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, today.
I was going to ask you about this.
Yeah, today. Yesterday actually, but it kind of came out today. They filed a claim saying that Love Is Blind cast members are employees, not contractors, which is gigantic. And I don't need to get into all of that, but this is huge. And I'm sitting there today and I'm like, and I actually found out last night, and ironically, I find out from the New York Times before I found out. And I'm just not even gonna, like, I knew it was coming, but I didn't know that it was official.
You're like the guy who got traded on a team and you're like, I had to find out from Twitter. Adam Schefter.
Yeah, exactly.
Not my agent.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it kind of felt. And so, I there's a lot of work that's gone into this, a lot of emotions, a year and a half of all sorts of different stuff to support the investigation. I did it with another person as well. And, just checking in with her, like, how are you feeling today? Right. This is a lot, this is a lot. And instead of being, because my instinct was to say, like, what do you think about the article? What do you think about? But it's like, actually, I know what you think. I as much as I can, because, we kind of did some of this stuff sort of together. And then to ask how someone feels, how she felt about it, thank God she felt good. I felt a little ick this morning about it all, but, asking how someone feels about something is going to get a much more authentic reaction than asking someone what they think about it. Long story short.
No, but I think you're absolutely right. I would say that's a really good way to frame it from a question perspective. But I think a step before that, something that I found to be true. This is what we talk about the speaking. Like this, the speech that I do at places is called "The Power of Vulnerability," and to me, so much of what drives all of this for everybody is more often than not, like people want to come forward. They want to share what's on their mind, but it's terrifying to put yourself out there. And so what I have found is in our circles, among our friends, like the best value you could bring a lot of times is being the one who unapologetically is themselves, being authentic, being real as possible. And
I
then,
always say that. I'm unapologetically myself.
unapologetically you. And then beyond that, like, hey, I'm really struggling with this. Here's how I'm struggling with this. And like, be unafraid. You can't ask of anyone around you to share if you're not first willing to do it yourself. And then what happens that I've found time and time again, I've seen it in my own life, I've seen it among people I've talked to, is I share and then I subconsciously then give everybody else like permission, whether they needed it or not. It's not about what I actually said or did. It's just that now they're like, okay, I'm not the first one. Because how many times have you been in a room where like the speaker's talking, they're like, anybody here ever feel like this? And then no one raises their hand because it's awkward. No one wants to be the first one to raise their hand.
Yeah.
But then someone does. And then what happens? Slowly, bing,
the floodgates
bing, bing.
are opened. Yep.
Yeah, but someone has to take that first step forward. Someone has to be the first one to come forward and say, hey, this is what's going on in my life. So I think that's the other thing you could do too. I love the way you framed it from a question standpoint. But before that, even just being the person among your group of friends, especially among men, to say, hey, you know what? I'm not afraid to admit this stuff sucks. This hurt. Here's why it hurt. Here's what I'm feeling. You then, you might have some friends along the way that go, wow, that guy's like a little in his feelings too much for me. And then you lose him. Too bad. That's fine.
Well, I always like to say you shed the people that are not meant for you. When you do the work, you shed the people that are not meant for you.
Yeah, and that's true for friends. It's also true for like if you're someone who puts yourself out there publicly. I'm sure along the way with like everything you've been through with Love Is Blind, but also just the work you're doing now, like along the way, people are like, you know what, Nick's not for me.
Yeah, like everyone who's making reality TV shows and tons of money off of all of it. But that's okay. And you're right. You shed people that are not meant for you, whether that's in public or in personal or whatever that is. But like there's a piece, at least that I find a piece in that, because I truly believe that I'm on a path, and I think this is for everyone, but obviously this is me. I feel that I'm on a path, and I've got an end goal and a destination in mind, and I will fight to get there. And then there's a side quest, but that side quest needs to have an end path as well. Or sometimes that side quest turns out was the end path. And so I think with that, on these quests of life, you lose people, you gain people, and it's all about timing and the moment that they're there, they're supposed to be there. And then the moments when they're not, they're not. And you just got to kind of find a peace and aggressing that things are going to work out the way that they're supposed to, because that's really the only way things ever work out.
Yeah. No, so. I'm a firm believer in that too. Like to some degree, like you can be religious or not. Like I'm not particularly, but I do tend to believe things unfold as they should.
Exactly. As they should. All right. So before we wrap up, which I think that's a good note to move on to you asking me anything that you have in your burning desires to ask, even though you interviewed me a few months ago.
Well, I did want to talk to you a bit. Okay. So you said like you felt a little ick about the recent decision to say that they are, correct me if I'm wrong. They said that they are now a union, or wait, what was the wording exactly?
No. So a year and a half ago, I filed a claim with the National Labor Relations Board that was saying that I believe we were misclassified and we should have been classified by employees, and here's why. So when you're a contractor, contractors have autonomy over themselves, the jobs they take. They're independent of any business telling them what to do or what they make or whatever. They get to make those decisions, right? Mm-hmm. Employees but contractors are not protected by labor law, because they get to pick and choose because they're independent. When you're
pros and cons, I got you.
Right. So then when you're an employee, which is really determined by how much control they have over you, how much you get paid, what work you do, when you work, where you work, all of that stuff, you're protected by labor laws. So you can, guaranteed a minimum wage, you get overtime. If you're hourly, you get to talk about your working environment publicly. You get to organize into unions if you want to. Like those are all protected by federal law. So the way reality TV has done things is they've classified cast members as contractors, but their
They tell you when you're
actions.
going to be there. They tell you all the things that you have to do. So your argument is they should be employees.
Yes. And then you should get that pay. You should have the ability to unionize. And then what they do is they threaten you with legal action, or they, sue Renee Poche for $4 million because she was speaking about her experience. And in the reality, you're talking about your working environment. You're allowed to do that, and that's protected by law from retaliation. So
Right.
they did a 1.5 year long investigation and determined that Love is Blind cast members are actually employees. Now it's just right now it's just Love is Blind are actually employees, and that they need to immediately eliminate these unlawful provisions in the contract that are anti-employee. They've listed them out. It's like a 36-page document in total, and now they're going to have to settle with us and the National Labor Relations Board by April of next year, or this is going to go in front of a judge. And
No one wants that.
no, I don't think they want that. And
No, not at all.
the reason is because the way that their provisions and everything, and you're an employee here, and I'm sorry, you're a contractor here, but we gave you a W-2 because we were in California, and legally in California, they had to give us a W-2 because by California labor law, we were employees, but they tell us in our contracts that we're contractors, but then you issue a W-2, which is proof that someone's an employee. Like, it's crazy the circles that they work around to maintain the status quo. So I am dying to know how they defend this without proof. You can defend one provision without proving another one. So it's
Right.
it's very interesting. But what this really does, and I have some content I want to put on it, but what this really does is this lifts sort of the NDAs out of everyone from Love is Blind, and they can freely talk about their experience. And we can actually start unionization efforts of these casts, because right now, like, this is deemed unlawful behavior by the production companies. And so I don't know what's going to happen, but this is the first time that the National Labor Relations Board has ever dipped anything labor into the reality TV space. And it has an opportunity to change everything in the landscape, but it's also got the opportunity to set precedents for other shows. And I know that through the UCAN Foundation, there are other shows that we've helped follow this same process. So this is a lot, but the ick factor, to get back to what you said, if I'm being honest, it's very hard for me to keep myself in the Love is Blind world, in the reality TV world. I am forever attached to it. I'm forever attached to my ex-wife. Every 6 months, a new season comes out. Every 6 months, I have to thrust myself into all the headlines, who's together, who's not, and constantly get reminded of what my experience was like and all of the struggles that came with it. And so that's normal. Now, with this work I'm doing with UCAN, and even this, like, I'm reading the New York Times article about it, and of course it talks about my relationship from Love is Blind. So it's constantly in your face. And when people in a non-public relationship decide that something isn't going to work, or they get a divorce, or they end a relationship,
It's over.
it's over. You can block the person. You never have to see them, out of sight, out of mind, which is how I've always dealt with a breakup. It's always out of sight, out of mind. I get rid of the phone number. I get rid of the social media. I delete the photos, not all of them, but nonsense. I don't want the memories coming up on my phone. I cut it off. And that's it, because it's out of sight, out of mind. I don't want to know what they're doing. I don't want to know who they're dating. I don't want to, see pictures of us together. I just, that's how I heal. So every time something happens, or I find, and I mute everything on social media as much as I can, but it still trickles through. People still want to tell me, they want to DM me. They don't, and it's not malicious. It's just, so it's the ick comes from, this is another thing that drags me into this place that messed up my life and hurt me so much that I've got to go back into it. And each time I get a little bit tougher, but it gets to the point where it gets to me sometimes. So, reading the article, the paragraph about my relationship, like it just, oh God, it's just like a reminder. It's the ick of like, oh, it's like a pit in my stomach kind of thing. But I know that the work is so important, and I'm so proud of everyone at UCAN and everyone who's stepped up to be a trailblazer in this. And we just made change like this. There is no going back here from this. So we just made change. It's too big of a
show to like shut down. So like they just have to adapt at this point.
Yeah. Well, I think they'll fight it. They might fight it all the way to the Supreme Court. Who knows? It wouldn't surprise me.
I mean, you say that, but like that's going to cause more harm. I feel like that's going to cause more press and more conversation. I feel like at this point, it's in their best interest. And I'm not a legal expert by any means, but like to me, it's like let's just pay these people, adapt it where we can, and move on.
But that's part of the problem with reality TV is it's so cheap because they don't have to follow rules. They don't have to follow laws. They don't have to pay people.
Like, I mean, to be fair, I think like Love is Blind's a little different. Like I'm not even someone who watches that type of stuff, but I'm aware of all of it.
Oh yeah, it's the most popular reality show
by a mile. And so to me, like I could see we're a world where we're not developing new shows because it's like we have to put more intentionality about it. Because to your point, it's not as cheap to create anymore. But like Love is Blind is a behemoth. They're not going to just shut that down all of a sudden because they have to pay more money because they know the ROI is still there. It may not be as good as it once was.
Yeah, they have to pay more money, yes, but then they can't shoot for 18 hours a day. So now you're looking at like the content, the paying, the way you can't keep under wraps all of the shit they do to people. Like people can talk about it now, so they're going to have to clean up their behaviors or be completely exposed. And let me tell you, there's a lot of people out there that have had far worse things happen to them than the people that have spoken up in a lot of cases. And when those people are freed and the gag is out, people are going to be shocked at the amount of people that have been severely psychologically, physically harmed and aren't able to speak anything because they're scared of getting sued. So it's going to be... I'm here for it, and I am just proud of everyone who's stepped up and helped make this move. This is real change. It's like fundamental real change.
It really is. Like, and again, like as someone who's like passively aware of it, like even to me, like I'm always going to be pro the people. I don't care what your industry is. I'm very pro the people. Like when it comes to that. So like, you know what, if this is some way that people are being mistreated, like I'm rooting for those people to get the best out of it that they possibly can. But to your point, like if they can rule that way, then like, yeah, it's either deal with it or keep fighting it out in court. And that's just going to be that much more public embarrassment for them. That's why I think like it's been their best interest to like walk away and call it a day.
I think so too. I don't think they will, at least not yet, but we'll see. Time will tell.
Well, maybe they're going to cut you all a fat check to be quiet, and then they can keep doing what they were doing.
So I don't know if they can do that.
I don't know.
I think
they can do anything. It's just a matter of not they'll get away with it.
Well, right. Well, now that it's like sitting with the National Labor Relations Board and in the court system, I don't know. But like, hey, I actually, someone asked me a while ago, like when I first started doing this, would you take like a payoff?
Sure.
And I was like, no, because I can't be bought. And then I was like, but $5 million might change that.
Okay, so that's a personal belief that I have always had about life. Is we all look. We could have a whole separate conversation about whether or not money should matter and all these different things. Happy to have that conversation. Nonetheless, the world that exists today, money does matter, and I don't care what your beliefs are. For the most part, like I'm not gonna end someone's life. Right, for money, like that's a line I can't cross. But outside of the truly heinous things that are out there in the world, there's probably a number for everything for me. And there's even more of a number when you put actual cash literally in front of me. Because we can all say, oh, I wouldn't do that for this amount of money. But then that's easy to say when you're just talking at a bar with your friends. It's another thing when someone literally hands you the cash right in front of your face.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, $5 million, that's...
Not now. I'm not taking money now. I'm taking this as far as it needs to go. But before, I might have taken the money. I would have entertained the conversation. I hate that I have so much conviction about stuff sometimes, and pride. I have a lot of pride. Sometimes, there's a reason that's one of the 7 deadly sins, right? But
Right.
it to me right now, it's about doing the right thing, and it isn't about me. It's never really been about me. It's been about, I don't want this to happen to other people. I can take it. I don't want other people to have to take it. And so to me now it's about conviction. But again, maybe a stack of, I think there's a better, never mind. I'm not going to say what I was going to say, but anyway, we'll
Tell me
see what
offline.
happens. Yeah, I'll tell you offline. But tell me before we head out, where can people find you on social media? Where can they find your book and find your podcast? And all those links will be below, by the way.
Absolutely. So yeah, so mental health with Will is pretty much the standard for everything. On Instagram, there's underscores after every word. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. While we still have TikTok, YouTube as well. Yes, and my show, Sunday Reset with Will and Friends, is available live on Instagram if you follow me. If not, it will be uploaded on YouTube and Spotify. My book, One Step Forward, Ideally in the Right Direction, is available on Amazon and Kindle, as well as Kindle Unlimited if you have that subscription. And book number 2, Don't Take It Personally, will be out sometime in the spring of next year. Yeah, next year.
Nice. Very cool. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
No, I really appreciate you having me. Thank you so much. It's been great getting to know you over this time.
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't agree more. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Sounds good.
Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Eyes Wide Open. If you enjoy the show, the best way to support us is by sharing or dropping a review. For more information and content, check out engagewithnick.com or find me on Instagram at nthompson513. Don't go through life blind. Do the work so you can show up in